It's time for Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
Missing church is one thing. Is missing Easter another? This is Wretched Radio, the question du jour, or at least the question of due tomorrow. What about Easter? Most churches, I think, have settled into place regarding missing Sunday services because of coronavirus, but knocking on the church calendar door. It's Easter. Will that be a different story? That is the question. How you going to answer that? By the way, not every church seems to be skipping Sunday services. There are some who are continuing to say, nope, not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. And whilst I understand the desire to continue doing churches, the motivation of some of them, not so sure about it. For instance, a big church in Louisiana, they are defying the coronavirus state order, saying from the pastor, the virus, we believe, is politically motivated. We hold our religious rights dear, and we're going to assemble no matter what someone says. Well, that, I guess, would be one motivation. Political ponderings are of interest, but should they be used to defy a state order? I don't think that's a good motivation. I can understand other considerations, but that one, this is speculation. I don't. Look, other radio programs can debate that. We don't. Not sure that that is the right motivation for a church if they're going to insist on doing Sunday services. This is a big church, by the way. This also happens to be a church that appears to be a little bit more interested in some signs and wonders than I would be. This church defying state orders, saying, nope, it's because we think that this is perhaps politically motivated. We're going to keep doing our church services. Most churches, I think, have settled into there can be circumstances when it is not a sin to not assemble, even if you believe that a weekly assembling is a commandment. There are some. Now, this is a divide I get. I understand this, that we do not see a specific command for the assembling of the saints. What is the regularity of that? I think the pattern was laid down for us in Creation Week, that we have a day, a time set aside for God. And the pattern that was established in the New Testament was the, quote, Lord's Day. That's what it was called, the Lord's Day. And it was Sunday. So I think that we have a specific pattern with enough of a commandment. You put the two together as you go about having Scripture interpret Scripture, the analogy of Scripture. We should indeed be getting together weekly. And it would be considered, in my estimation, a sin to not. So why am I not bothered that churches are not assembling? Because laws are made for man, not man for laws. And if there are circumstances that prohibit it for an exceptional reason, then I think that people are not sinning by not doing church on Sunday. Some people would say, I'm being a bit double-minded. Hey, you say that it's a sin to not meet, but then you're saying it's not a sin to not meet? Yes, that's what I'm saying. And in my mind, it lives harmoniously. There are some folks who would disagree. I don't hate you. I hope you don't hate me. I sure hope that coronavirus doesn't cause splits in weird ways. I really do. I see right now an increasing number of different perspectives, for instance, on the statistics of coronavirus, the government response to coronavirus. Interesting debate, not one we would have on this program, but please don't let that divide you. Statistical analysis is not a subject that should cause division among the brethren, but I wonder if it will. What about Easter? It's coming up. The president has said he'd like to see America open for business, and especially by Easter time, because he believes that would be rather symbolic. I guess in a sense you could say that. But is Easter different? If Easter comes and coronavirus is still a concern, and the government is still saying, don't get together in groups of 10 or more, what will your church do? Is Easter different than any other Sunday? And the answer to that is, in a sense, yes. Every Sunday is a commemoration of the Lord's resurrection. That's why the early church got together on what they now call the Lord's Day, because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And yet, I think because we understand that God determined that there were certain Old Testament festival days that were special. They were festive. The same thing is true with Easter. It is a special Sunday. But would that change your church's understanding of whether or not the church should get together concerned about while they're concerned about coronavirus? And my take on it is that's up to your church to decide. I understand the emotions and the sentiments. Believe me, totally get it. But I think we need to allow some liberty and some grace for different churches to make different decisions on the subject. I do think Easter is a special Sunday. Are we commanded to have that set aside as a special day? And the answer to that is no, we're not. Every Sunday, I think, is a celebration of the resurrection. And yet, because we see that that is an annual recurring remembrance, it is indeed a special day. Are we sinning if we don't get together on Easter? And the answer to that question, I think, should be left to different churches to make those decisions. I really do. I know what I would do, but I don't think that I would be right-minded to make a law where there is no law. There's going to be Christians that just flat out see this differently, and they're not heretics. They're not trying to be defiers of clear commandments. Now, if they've got some wonky motivations for it, that's another thing. But I think we need to allow some liberty for other Christians to make decisions we might not make. Another question that is a bit more persistent now these days as we make it into multiple weeks of coronavirus lockdown, the Lord's table. What about communion? We're supposed to be doing that regularly. Some would say weekly. Some would say as oft as we get together. Some have different patterns, but all of those patterns are now being challenged, aren't they? Should we, perhaps, start doing communion via the internet like we're doing church? Should we, as individual families, start taking communion? Different people going to have different takes on that. Let me share with you some thoughts for starters from 9 Mark's. It's Capitol Hill Baptist Church, Mark Dever's church. This is regarding communion, the Lord's table. The physical act of gathering is essential. So if you're going to do communion, it needs to be with your local body, because that is an aspect of it. Now remember, what are we remembering when we get together for communion? It is the Lord's death. It is the Lord's his shedding of blood. We remember that, what he did for us. But there's another component and another element, which is why we call it communion. It is not a biblical name. It's a name that we gave to it because we believe that we are in union together. We do this together as oft as you gather. And so there's a gathering element that draws us together and reminds us that we are in a body, the greatest club on earth. And so Capitol Hill, sort of one and the same, but not really. The physical act of gathering is essential. So in other words, if you can't get together and do communion in a church, doing it online ain't going to get the job done. That's their take. It's not incidental. 1 Corinthians 11, Paul refers 5 times to the fact that they celebrate the Lord's Supper when they all come together in the church as one assembly meeting in one place at one time. That'd be your 1 Corinthians 11, 18, 17, 20, 33, and 34. To make the Lord's Supper into something other than a meal of the whole church, sitting down together in the same room, is to make it something other than the Lord's Supper. It is not the case that a virtually mediated, physically dispersed Lord's Supper is less than optimal. It's simply not the Lord's Supper. So you can do the Lord's Supper, go through the ritual on the internet, but Capitol Hill would say But you're not doing the Lord's Supper because that's not what it is. You don't do it separately. You do it together. Now, some people are going to respond and say, but wait a second. In the first century, it wasn't even an option. So it's okay to do it. We're looking at each other through we're doing a major Skype together. We're watching one another. We can even see one another, perhaps. Can you do that? I don't know what the kids do with the technology these days. But they would make that argument. Now, I would hermeneutically say, no, that's the Bible is good for all time. Because when God inspired the Bible, he was fully aware of the internet. And so the command was, the pattern was established, and it was when they came together, and so we should too. Now, can you imagine different Christians coming up with different conclusions nevertheless? I can. What are we going to do with the Lord's table if the coronavirus lockdown continues? Next on Wretched Radio.
Welcome to a world without Wretched. Nobody wants this. Please become a Wretched Gospel partner